What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Kenny Buller, your co-host of the Second Floor Podcast, ready to give you some huge, exciting new news. We're about to launch a brand new season with a brand new host and a brand new face to the name. I bring to you someone who I have the utmost respect for in our community, someone who I believe is, with every word they say, with every smile they bring to the table, it is the most authentic and genuine you will see on the show. And that is the one and only Susan Charara. She's our brand new host with a brand new series called Amplify. She is someone who is actually going to be spearheading one-on-one conversations with mainly influencers in the community who are females doing amazing things. Everything that is still branded and recognized as someone elevating in their life. But now it's going to be neat because it's from the perspective of another female. And it's something that dawned on us where we want to see more women empowerment. We want to see more women supporting other women. And now is our opportunity to really bring that to light with a fresh new name, a fresh new face, and under the guidance of Susan herself. I want you to understand that this is something that she's carrying forward with all of her energy, and all of her ideas are coming to light with full autonomy for her to do so. So, let's give a warm welcome. Let's tune in wherever you are. If you happen to be listening to this while you're working out, or if you're cooking, or if you're driving, or whatever it is, I can 120% guarantee you that boy or girl listening to this, you will gain a lot of value. And just to share a story myself on the side, we on a directional basis and on a level of consulting basis would not be where we're at today with the new studio and just the new strategy we have had it not been for Susan in the first place. So super excited to have her on the show and to have her be a part of the team. So without further ado, we bring to you Susan Charara. It's an absolute pleasure
Thank
to have you as the new host of the Second Floor Podcast.
Honestly, Kenny, I'm excited to be joining as the new host of the Second Floor Podcast.
Definitely. So. You know what? I sat down with Omid, and then we got to know you so well over the last few months. And him and I felt like you would be the perfect addition to the new series that we have planned.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, with everything that you've been doing for the community, for who you are as a person, when we got to see with our own eyes what your Founders and Makers series looked like with ATB, we knew right then and there that this is someone special.
Aww.
Right? And I want to kind of pick your brain about where that interest came from, right? Because we saw what you were doing and we're like, is Susan not doing pretty much what we're doing, but in a live event setting?
Yes.
And where did you kind of get that just innate desire to do so?
To do Founders and Makers.
Yeah.
Okay. So it started because, the reason I launched Founders and Makers in the spring of 2019. So for me, I've spent my entire career working with entrepreneurs. Like I've only ever worked with entrepreneurs. And throughout the years, I've been doing it for 15 plus years. Like, Kenny, I get to have the best conversations. Like I get to see it all, because a lot of times, I go in and I'm helping them grow their business, and I get to have I'm privy to things, and I get to have conversations that other people don't typically get to have. And I just, a lot of these conversations are behind the scenes. They're closed door conversations, but they're very insightful. And I always, for me, because I came from a family of entrepreneurs, I have a real deep admiration for anyone who's a business owner. And I think there's so much gold in their journey. And I remember just thinking, I want to create a platform where I can bring these conversations to light. So rather than, me having these conversations one-on-one with clients or with people that I was mentoring or just giving advice to, I want to bring these conversations to the public and create a platform where we can start to talk about things more openly.
Exactly.
And so when I made the move back to Edmonton, part of also launching Founders and Makers was also me wanting to build, reconnect with my community, continue to build my network here in Edmonton. And so Founders and Makers was born. I just thought, let's create this platform. Let's bring different entrepreneurs from different spaces to the stage and just talk about meaningful things and have those conversations that I get to have anyways, just in a public forum.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And now that you're going to be able to take that experience and sort of apply that into a one-on-one setting with what you have planned with Second Floor Podcast, tell us what you're most excited to do. Because I know for a fact there's so much about you that's already so different. It's so engaging. And I know we've already shared what you have planned. Why don't you let us and our audience know what you're going to bring to the table?
And I just want to actually take one step back to say why this was such a great fit. So when I launched Founders and Makers, we did a couple of different events, and it was an event-based speaker series. What I realized was in an event-based setting, you're very limited. I mean, people's attention span is so, because people are sitting in seats, right?
Yeah.
So, we'd have these conversations, and these conversations would be, a half hour, if you're lucky, maybe a little bit more. And I just felt, I remember like after the second or third event, I just remember like, thinking to myself, like, I want to go deeper with these conversations. And some of these conversations actually like need to be longer than a half hour, but you have this event, you've got a particular schedule that you have to work through. So I already started thinking by about the third event, I was thinking to myself, I think I want to move this over to video. Like I want to continue to have the events, but then the idea that I had was so at the events, we'd have 3 different entrepreneurs. And so at the time I thought, we'll continue to have the events, have the entrepreneurs, and we'd go wide with our conversations, but then maybe from the very beginning, I always saw there being a video element where then I go one-on-one with each of the entrepreneurs and go deep.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was going to be both, right? I'm like, okay, it's easier to launch the event-based platform. And then at some point in time, I'll introduce video. I didn't think I would be as quick to want to do video like as I was. Like I thought I'd do an entire year of events.
Okay.
And then by the third event, I'm like, no, like a lot of these conversations are, and then the other thing too is when people are in front of an audience, it's a lot different than when they're one-on-one.
That's
like
true. There's only so much on the surface that you get,
it's like,
right?
I did notice that because with a lot of these entrepreneurs, I'd connect with them beforehand. And it's like, when it's just one-on-one, they're willing to go deeper. But when you're sitting in front of an audience, I noticed that they weren't, they were a lot more cautious about what they were willing to share versus not share, which I totally get.
Good point.
So I just want to share this story because I think it's quite serendipitous how this came to be.
Yeah.
So I kind of like by the fall decided, okay, no, like I actually want to move forward with the video. Like I was planning on doing Founders and Makers for a full year before I even touched video.
Yeah.
And then by about the fall, I'm like, no, I want to do video. I want to start doing the one-on-one and going deep.
Yeah.
At the time, I was very lucky. So for people who don't know, you guys came out to the second event. We had Raj Dillon, who was one of our featured speakers. And then you guys, because Raj is like beloved within the Second Floor community, you guys came out to support Raj. And that's how I met you and Omid.
Definitely.
And we met and clicked right away.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking, I reached out to Omid thinking, okay, I know that he does the video. And I'm like, I want to reached out to Omid thinking, Omid, here's what I'm doing. Like, let's just have a conversation and tell me what I need to know. You guys have been doing this for a year. What do I need to know that I don't know? Like, what would you do differently? And so
what do the processes look like to make it happen, right?
So I call up Omid. I'm in my mind thinking, okay, I want to move forward with video. And then the other thing too is video isn't cheap, right? So it's like, how much is this going to, realistically, like what should I be budgeting? How much is this going to cost? His number was a little bit higher than I wanted to hear. So that after I got off the phone with Omid, I was like, okay, maybe I'll do half the episodes that I thought. But what I found to be very serendipitous is that, so we have that conversation. And then after that conversation, you guys realized, it was at the same time where you're now ready to bring on a third host. You guys were thinking we maybe want to go with a female. Yeah. And then here I step into the picture saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing a podcast and here's what I want to do. And I just found that it was so serendipitous and it just...
Honestly,
I wanted to share that story because I just, it just, the timing of it all was perfection. And
literally.
And then you called me the next day. You're like, we have a proposition for you.
I texted you, Susan, the moment I was walking up the stairs to Omid's office. Yeah. And he was on the phone with you. Yeah. And he's like, oh, it's Susan. And I just hear, clearly just on his end, how you guys are turning the wheel on something along the lines of you wanting to learn about how to get involved in video content. Or even in general, just to get more one-on-one conversations out there to the world. Yeah. And then I immediately, once that phone call ended, I said, you know what, Omid? we can definitely look into collaborating with Susan. There's something that we can do here. But I was awestruck because it was immediately, I just sat down, I remember, and I was like, there's a need that we have that we are not ourselves fully capturing. And we're also realizing that we do not currently, I find, for one, have the credibility, or two, I find have the personality. Like, we felt like, honestly, just through what content we've been building onto the second floor, we've been lacking the ability to showcase more women in business, more women empowerment, more like women supporting women. And then it just clicked. I'm like, here Susan is wanting to be in front of the camera more and potentially starting your own thing. And I was like,
and I had no idea that you guys were, you know, for me, when I reached out to Omid, it was like, I genuinely just, dude, can I pick your brain? Like, here's where I'm going with Founders and Makers.
And then within a day.
And it just, but the reason I share that, Kenny, though, is like, that's when you know something is meant to be, right? When everything aligns and the timing of it is, you know, so for me, it's like when you reached out and you said, hey, you know, I want to throw something at you.
Yes.
And it just honestly, like, you know, I didn't even have to think about it. I'm like,
awesome.
this just feels like it's meant. And I was a huge fan of yours too. So like I loved what you guys were doing with the second floor. Like I want to give a shout out to Sean Kanungo. He's the reason I discovered you guys. And so from then, since you've had Sean on, I've been watching your episodes and I'm like, these guys are fresh. These guys are different. There's just some, like, you guys aren't the only ones in the city who are doing a podcast, but for some reason you guys stood out to me.
No, thank you.
There was
so
just
much.
something about you guys. And so for me, it was like, I consider, honestly, like, it's just as much of an honor for me, for you guys to, you know, extend this opportunity, because I really, it wasn't like I didn't know who, I was a fan of yours. And then when you know, extended the opportunity, I'm like, this is an honor.
Well, that's just it though, because you're someone, Susan, who, for starters, as much as we say you bring a different world and you bring a different perspective, you're so similar to us in terms of, you know, you're first generation Canadian, you come from a South Asian background, but at the same time,
Middle Eastern,
yeah, my bad. We'll correct that.
That's right. If there's anything wrong, I am happy to be
I stand corrected. But at the end of the day, it's so neat because here we are as, you know, these young millennials. And then people talk about all the time, like our parents were baby boomers, and you're right in between.
Right in the middle.
But you get it, right? For someone who's Generation X, you understand way more than we do what it's like for our parents, but you also get it from where we come from. And it's just this neat blend that you carry through that's going to, I know for a fact, blow people away, right? And I know it's not just women that you're planning on having, and I've only kind of encourage you to do that, but I'm just excited for you to bring anyone on who you get to choose, turn this into your own thing, and just see what your conversations look like, because it's going to bring a little bit of different flavor, right? What exactly does that look like? And I know I kind of bit my tongue beforehand, and I've been so curious to know, but now that you know, like? You kind of had some time to think about it, have you had some ideas that you'd like to kind of share now as we introduce you for what we're going to expect with some of the episodes or some of the ideas you have in store?
Well, for me, if I look at everything, if I look at two things, what lights me up, what and who lights me up in everything that I do. Most of what, so, you know, in business, I'm dealing with entrepreneurs. So I'm a marketing and growth strategist. So I'm working with business owners, helping them take their business to the next level. So, and I share that only because, like, you know, I deal with entrepreneurs. That's who lights me up. You know, I've been given opportunities to go work with companies, and like very reputable and well-recognized companies where the end client wouldn't be an entrepreneur. And that's what always makes me hesitate. I'm like, I'd love to work for this company, but I just genuinely love the company of entrepreneurs. So that's what lights me up, and having conversations with them and just sharing their journeys and the lessons that they've learned. Because you're starting to see now, and particularly with women in business, like more and more women are becoming entrepreneurs. So I think, you know, we need, even though more and more women are becoming entrepreneurs, the interesting thing is, you know, women breaking a certain financial like threshold, you know, one of the things, or like growing, you know, there's not a lot of women who are, you know, breaking a certain financial threshold or taking it to the next level. Like a lot of them will stay with one location versus multi-location versus franchising. And so for me, I'm always curious, like for the ones who are doing it and doing it well and having success, like what lessons can you share? And what are the things that you wish you knew? Like And I want to have more of those open and honest conversations, because for a lot of these women, especially like the ones who got started 10 years ago, where it's like they had to figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are actually happy that it's like, hey, if I can share what I learned with others who are just starting now so that they don't make the mistakes that I made, or they can get to certain outcomes a lot quicker than I got to, those are the conversations that excite me. But I would say like, I love anything to do with the entrepreneur, like just the journey and the lessons that they've learned, because I think like whether you're an entrepreneur or not, I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from them that we can apply to our lives.
Absolutely. You should no longer be afraid to ask
exactly
for advice or recommendations.
Exactly.
Right?
And now my friend was Shazia, who you guys had on the podcast. She was telling me this new term called intrapreneur. So it's someone who's employed by a company but has an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
So even though if you're not an entrepreneur, like don't feel like there's nothing to be learned from them. Like just to me, it's the mindset. It's the way of being.
Yeah.
So I'd say like there's that on the business side. And then outside of business for me, just mentoring young females, like, and I call them, young women in business, emerging leaders in business.
Yeah.
And the reason that's so near and dear to my heart is because I got started in the finance industry. And when I got started like 15 years ago, there weren't a lot of women in finance, right? So I think 10, 20% at most. And so I can relate to like having to walk that path and walk that path alone. Yeah. And even the women that were in that space, the interesting thing is like a lot of the people who took me under their wings and like mentored me and helped me hone my skill were men. Yeah. Right. And I always just thought like, I want to be for other women what I never had for myself. And being, now it's more common to see women in like, financial spaces. But when I was getting started, it was every woman for their own.
Was that more daunting? Like, did you feel like it was tougher to even
for
see yourself getting to that point, or did it make you hungrier? What did that look like?
No, it's funny. I've always like just my personality. I get along equally. Like I always say I'm a girl's girl, but I get along like most of my clients, even to this day, the bulk of my clients are men, right? And so I feel like I've just got a personality where I get along equally with women as I do with men. And if I walk into a room and it's predominantly men, I don't feel like I've just always been comfortable with that. Yeah. The one thing though, like I said, that I was kind of like, and I don't know if bothered is the right word, but it was always just kind of like the few women that there were, we didn't, it wasn't like they came and, I would have loved to be able to sit here and say, in my first 10 years, I had this woman and she mentored me. Yeah. Like the first female mentor I ever had, I was 30 years old. And it was when I left finance, right? Yeah. So for me, I've always I'm one of the few people where it's like all of my experiences in business have been positive experiences with men. Yeah. And I've been, mentored by men. I've been, all of the success I've had, those opportunities were given to me by men. Yeah. So it was more like, I just, I would have loved to be able to say, I had some women who are a part of that too. So for me, I always go back to, I want to be for others what I never had for myself. And I want to be like, there were things that I had to figure out on my own that I would have loved, Kenny. I would have, like the first time I ever asked for a raise, the first time I was promoted and they offered me a number that I just thought, are you kidding me with this number? I would have loved to be able to go to a female and say, what do I do? Yeah. Whereas like now when I mentor, what's really interesting is I was 30 years old when I had the first time I had a female mentor, and everyone that I've mentored minus one person has always been female. Oh, wow. And I'm like, talk to me about all the things that you're scared to, you don't think you can talk to another female about. Yeah. Like, are you up for a promotion? Do you want to ask for more? And like, let's have those conversations.
Where do you want to be in this company in 2 years, 5 years?
And I wish like I would have loved to there were things where it's like, I had to learn on my own. And when you learn on your own, it's trial and error. So there were so many mistakes that I made that if I just had one person say to me, hey, maybe don't do try this instead of this. Yeah. And so that's what I now try to be, for the young females that I mentor, but there's only so much that you can do one-on-one. So a platform like this, my intention with this platform is to invite more women to the table, to the podcast and have those conversations. And through those conversations, if we can inform and inspire young females and just shed light on, what they can do to help either, not make some of the mistakes that we made,
Yeah.
or get to where they want to get to a little bit quicker because they're aware of something that maybe we weren't aware of on our journey.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's one of my intentions in
Yeah.
joining this podcast, is just bringing more females
No,
to the
definitely.
podcast and
Much
going
needed.
like, I'd also say two things. Like, for me, I have no desire. Like, it took me a long time to decide to do a podcast. And I'd probably say for the last 3 or 4 years, Kenny, I've had
Really?
so many people say to me, like, you need to be on video.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
need to be
The type
sharing
of
your
conversations
voice.
you're having and
Like,
everything,
if
right?
I had $1 for because, every person who said that to me, I honestly probably could retire. But for me, it wasn't like, I don't want to just do a podcast for the sake of doing a podcast. Like,
Yeah.
what am I bringing to the table that's different?
There has to be meaning
And
behind it.
exactly. And for me, I just I came, when I sat there and I said, okay, if I'm going to say yes to this, why? And what am I bringing to, like, where am I going to add value? And
Which you did. I'm glad you took the time to really
yeah,
think about
no,
it.
I
right?
did. And I just thought, number one, I have no desire to do this if it's going to be surface level conversations. Like, I want to have open
deep.
and honest conversations, and I want to go deep within those conversations, right? So it's like, let's not skim the surface. And that also means inviting people who are willing to go that deep,
Yeah.
right? So
But that, you know what? I have to add, Susan,
Yeah, yeah.
one thing that I'm noticing a lot of traction on, and I'm sure you know what it is. We
Okay.
talked about it a lot, where women supporting other women,
Yeah.
right? You talked a lot about that, and now we're starting to see it a lot in the media.
Yeah.
Yet I've failed to notice it myself. Maybe it's just because of what I consume and what I see.
Yeah.
But I want to start seeing more conversations where I'm seeing another powerful woman speaking with another
Yeah, yeah.
independent, powerful woman. And then for other women to get empowered,
Yeah.
and just to see like, hey, there are women out there who are willing to support
Yeah.
others, right? And I feel like
that
you're
is
going to
the
be the
case
bridge
now.
to make that happen.
I will say, Kenny, like
On our
10
podcast.
years ago, so right now, sort of what you're hearing a lot of, like a term that you're going to hear in female circles is collaboration over competition.
Yeah.
I'll say 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. 10 years ago, it's like you kept your info to yourself. You used it as your competitive advantage. Whereas one thing I do want to credit millennials with, where they don't have that like competitive mentality. They really do. When I'm dealing with, young women under the age of 30, they really bring that collaboration over competition mentality to the table. And that excites me. Like, they want that. They don't, when they, go and work for a company, they don't want to compete with the other female that's at that company. There, it's like, how can we join forces and collaborate and have, what is it, like two holes, or, together we're better than each of us could be on our own, right?
Yeah.
So I do want to give credit, like that is changing, and that's changing because of like the millennials, right?
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. I see that. I want to ask you if there's a woman out there, dead or alive, who maybe they were a mentor from a distance,
from a
who you are
distance?
just so inspired by. Who is that and why?
Honestly, Oprah. Oprah, and then people always say that, like, for me, it's Oprah Winfrey. Like, she was the first person on two fronts. So number one, she was the first female that I ever saw who was sharing her voice and using her voice for the power of good. She decided at an early, like when she got into television, and, early on it was like for ratings, and, she was competing with the likes of a Jerry Springer.
Especially that
and,
time.
Yeah. And she just said, I'm not going to do that. Like, I have this platform, my voice and my platform. She made a decision early on that she was going to use it, for the power of good. And that always resonated with me. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to share my voice, like share it, for the good.
Yeah.
And so on that front, like she just, that always resonated with me. And for me, Kenny, and you'll probably relate to this, like so I'm Lebanese. So even though you're first generation Canadian, you go out into the world and you're dealing with the Canadian culture, but then you come home and you're dealing with like, the subculture at home and the community culture.
Yeah.
And up until like my teenage years, my thinking was very, like, I always say, I kind of like, the community I grew up in, and my thinking.
Like living two lives.
Yeah. And my thinking was like, my perspective and my thinking was very limited because I was like, but I was also a teenager. But when I started watching Oprah, like she opened up my eyes to different perspectives and like looking at things differently, like things I never ever saw talked about in my community. And I just thought,
brought a lot of awareness.
yeah, like she had that impact on me where it's like, wow, like I never thought, I'd always like, I'd watch her shows and be like, I never thought about it from that perspective, or I didn't think about that way. And so for me, she just opened up my eyes and like opened me to just a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And so I look at who I am today and I'm just like, if you can change the way that people think, that really is the ultimate, right? Because if you change the way you think, you end up changing the way they behave.
Yes.
And what's better than that? And so I always say, like, the person that I am today, like, I watched so much Oprah growing up that, like,
that's awesome.
Honestly, she was my first, like, not quote unquote mentor, but just someone who influenced me. I call it an influencer from from a distance, and just, opened my eyes up to just a different way of seeing the world and a different way of thinking.
It's incredible. It's so neat to know she's been able to do that for you and millions of others, right? I mean, the biggest token of knowledge I received from Oprah, outside of the many things she does as one of the biggest icons in the world, is she said, always set the intention. Yeah. And that was something I took on with the podcast, right? Where anytime you're in a meeting, anytime you're going to go meet a friend, anytime, whether it's formal or informal, give the other person you're going to meet an idea of what the hell is going to be the topic of conversation, right? Like to a degree where it's like, hey, I'm meeting with you, or hey, I'd like to have coffee with you. You ever get that? Where it's like just from someone, and obviously they want to pick your brain, and you're just wondering like, okay, well, we're going to have coffee, but what's the purpose here? And for someone like Oprah, she will stress that, you know what? It's as simple as saying, my intention today is to have coffee with you so that I can learn more about strategy behind certain marketing practices, or so I can learn about how you got to where you are today. Then you have an idea.
Yes.
Right? You have an idea of where the beginning, middle, and end is going to be. And when you see how well she does that on air and off the air through her show, right? When she's sitting down with guests, and to your point, how raw she gets, and how she's willing to ask questions that no one, even at that time, would ever be willing to speak on air about, right? To just get the raw, honest truth out of people.
Yeah. And more importantly, like, and people were comfortable sharing. Like, there is a demeanor, because anyone could, 10 people could have asked questions that no one else would ask, but there was something about her demeanor where she puts people at ease, and people, when she did ask those questions, people are willing to share, right? Yeah. So I could probably spend this whole podcast talking about Oprah, but
exactly. We want to know, based off of obviously your style and your creative ways of being an official host now. What is it going to look like with Susan being a host compared to, let's say, how Omid hosts his shows, how Kenny, myself, host my shows? Like, what are some, you know what I mean? I'm not saying to tell us the questions you have in mind to ask, but what's going to be your style?
I'll share my style. I don't want to compare it, because I think your guys' style is similar too. I don't want to compare it to like you or Omid. Yeah. For me, the style that I like is conversational, right? So what I don't want to do is like, and I know early on, when I first started the Founders and Makers, like you start quote unquote interviewing people. And I'm like, I'm not a journalist. That's not my background. I'm not looking to quote unquote interview people or even just sit there and ask questions. Like you're going to ask questions and they're going to answer. But to me, I want it to be two-way, because when I think about interviews, it feels very one-way. You've got the person asking the questions and the person answering. Now, the questions are guideposts, right? But I really, whatever guest comes on, I want the style to be conversational. Great. Where, we're having a conversation and people just get to listen in, and it's two ways, right? Yeah. So it's not just me sitting back, because a lot of times when I talk to people, they bring their insights, like I'll piggyback, know what? And then I'll add sort of my experience.
They're going to get a taste of what your life looks like too.
So conversational being one. And then also, just like I said, I'm not looking to have surface level conversations. Yeah. I have a friend, his name is Anthony. Shout out to Anthony Kimbley. And he's Irish, and he's as Irish as they come. Yeah. And he's got this famous line, like he's got a lot of famous lines, but this is the line that resonates with me the most. And he'll say to me, he's in business too. We worked together early on in my years. And he'll say, a lot of people so we'd go into a meeting and we'd come out of the meeting and he'd say, a lot of people were talking, but very little was being said. And that always stuck. And he's like, Susan, like if you're, don't be part of the noise. Like a lot of people are talking, but sometimes you'll watch podcasts where it's like, okay, there was a lot of talking and it was very entertaining to watch. But when all was said and done, like what actually was said here? What did I take away from this? I like that. So I'm all for like, you want it to be entertaining and you want it to be conversational, but I just go back to, I don't just want to be part of the noise. Like I want there to be like the two words that come to mind is substance and depth. Like at the end of the day, I want the people, if they watch it, they're enjoying, but more importantly, they're taking something away. Like, wow, she shared that story or she shared that experience.
Yeah.
And this is what I took away from it.
Yeah,
So
wow.
when I got, to the point where I was ready to do a podcast, like Anthony's words were literally in my ears. Like, don't be one of those people who's just talking, but very little is being said. And that's often what ends up happening when you're having those surface level conversations. Yeah. So it's like, let's go deep. Like, let's talk about the things that, both of us, maybe are like, I always think a little bit of like, if there's a little bit of uncomfortableness, I don't even know if that's
uncomfortability.
That's,
expand the comfort zone.
Exactly. That's right? When it's going to be a great conversation, because if you and I are talking and everything we're saying is comfortable, great. But if you and I are talking and all of a sudden we start talking about something and gets a little uncomfortable,
and you could tell,
that's where the gold is, right? Yes. So it's like, let's go there, right? Like, maybe, I don't want people, being uncomfortable the whole time, but let's not be afraid to say some of those things and have those uncomfortable conversations and really share, right?
And then we'll realize through that how many people actually relate.
Exactly.
How many people at that point are listening and be like, wow, I'm not the only one going through that.
Yeah.
Or just, having so much level of sympathy that goes towards that person at that point, right? I want to end off with this one question.
Okay.
And I want to ask you, for anyone listening to this, I don't even want to say for any woman listening to this, for any boy or girl out there,
any person,
yeah, exactly, man or woman,
yeah,
they're 25, they're in their mid 20s, maybe they now got a taste of what the real world looks like.
Yeah,
part of them doesn't know if they should ride it out with a nice, easygoing salary.
Yeah,
another part of them doesn't know if they should just take charge, take action, be an entrepreneur that they believe they want to be, but they fear failure. There's all this going on. Just what advice do you have for that person where there's so much that they're doing, they don't know what to put it into, and again, maybe they need a mentor, but they don't have it, but now they're listening to Susan, who's been through it. What would you tell them to do in that situation where they're feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. But
they want to try so much at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. And that's a great question, by the way. That's a really good question. There isn't a one piece of advice fits all.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is, know thyself and to thyself be true. And the reason I bring that up is what I would say to someone is like, know yourself, right? Because there are people who, at 25, like they are meant to be entrepreneurs, right? Like that's what they want to do. That's who they're meant to be. You don't want to be telling that person, go get a corporate job, like, build your tool set and then become an entrepreneur. And at the same time, on the flip side, not everyone's designed to be an entrepreneur. Like some people, it is their route is better off, like going into, getting the stable job. And so for me, what I always tell people is like, I think deep down, like, you have a sense of who you are, right? So like I just always tell people, know thyself. Like what does your gut tell you? What is it that you really want to do, right? And then to thyself be true. So that's where I would just say, like, really just be honest with yourself. Like, what is it that you want to do? And do you have the ability to do that, right? So like if someone came to me in their mid-20s and they're like, hey, I don't want, or came straight out of school and said, hey, I don't want to go like work for, company ABC. This is what I want to pursue, my life, I want to pursue art, right? If that's what you want to pursue and that's where your heart calls you to, great. But like, okay, how are you, like, I would also just say like, are you able to do that financially, right? Yeah. So but I'm a big believer in just honoring, you have to know yourself and honor what it is. I think a lot of us go around like seeking permission. And I know at different points in my life, I was like that too, where it's like, you kind of know what you want to do and you just want someone to tell you to do.
You ask all your friends.
It's almost like you're seeking, you know what you want to do. You know what you want to do. And you're just waiting for someone to tell you to do it. Yeah. And so I always say, like, don't ask for permission. If this is what your heart calls you to do and you think, and maybe it means, starting off and you're doing that and you have a job on the side to support that, but just know thyself and to thyself be true. Absolutely. So I don't know if that's,
I love that. No, that pulls some triggers because I asked that question personally as well in my case, and I just want to say, Susan, like, I have no idea how excited I am to have you on board.
Likewise, guys.
It is so much of a blessing and so much of
Yeah.
a big opportunity for the both of us, and to work with someone such as yourself who's done so much and is, as well, just provide so much knowledge, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so much, like I hope people feel it when they watch or listen to this, because
I
there's so
hope
much
so
depth
too.
to you,
Yeah.
you know. And even Gagan said it too. She's like, wow, she's like, Susan is like, she's so poetic. Like, you know,
Oh.
like I won't be surprised after this podcast if you start writing a
I
book,
already
right?
liked her. I'm gonna like her even. And I want to just, and Kenny too. I want to take a moment to acknowledge you and Ahmed. Like you guys, and I said, like, you know, I discovered you through Sean. I've been what you guys are doing. Like, you're fresh, you're different, you're bringing a different perspective. You just, yeah, like you guys, you're not the. You know, there's probably at least 12 different people I know in the city of Edmonton alone who are doing podcasts.
Yeah.
And yet, like, I'll watch one here and there. You guys are one of the few that I consistently watch. And it's like, I don't just say this, like, I am just as excited and I'm just as honored to be joining this because I love what you guys are doing. So I just want to take that moment to acknowledge you guys as well, because
awesome.
you guys, you've got something special here.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to be coming on board.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Susan.
You're
I can't
welcome.
wait for everyone listening to this. I want you all to know that from this point forward, you are going to be seeing a whole lot more of Susan, and to see the Woman Empowerment Series, if that's what we want to call it in the meantime.
Well, yeah.
And I'm just super excited to see more of you and to have you collaborate with us and officially be part of the team. So
Thank you so much.
welcome, Susan. Thank you.